invite Chris Brown. Please come share all the wonderful news about K-State. But I am going to be your timekeeper, and I want to leave at least 2 minutes for a question and answer. Okay?
Yeah. Good morning. Can you hear me? This is my first day out of bed all week. I came just for you, so yeah. So I hope I don't sound too much like a frog. But I really wanted to come on. Thank you for the work session. We're actually about to begin to adopt this same model at Kentucky State for our board. So it's really useful to get into the work. The other reason I wanted to come is because this is a great year to report data, and our understanding has grown. And so in the past, sometimes it's been difficult to work through the stronger by degrees, but we're in a great position. And so we're extremely optimistic. As a matter of fact, our campus just came off of our SAC-CLC cycle, and in December. As a matter of fact, I just got the letter last week. We were reaffirmed for 10 years without monitoring report and without sanction, which is significant. Thank you so much. We've got a great team that's working. We were charged, as has just happened with the state data, and you'll hear from each campus, to walk singularly through the placemat, and that we could leave a leave behind. And so I'll talk about the leave behind last. And also, I know you've already received our management plan digitally, but if anyone wanted a hard copy of the management plan, that is there. Most of you know the history of our campus, and that the institution experienced several plunges and cycles in the middle of the last decade, which ultimately led to a legislative joint CPE management and improvement plan. We are in the 3rd year of that management and improvement plan, a third of a 4-year cycle. And so much of the progress and growth that has happened, I think, should be credited to the roadmap that CPE laid out for the campus. So a part of my work is just the ability to walk through the roadmap. The first graph on the placemat is the 6-year graduation rate. This is a campus that at its low point had a 7% 4-year graduation rate and a 9% 6-year graduation rate. Certainly progress has been made, not yet enough, but there's good news. So if you look at where we are currently for the last year, which would have been May 2019, we ended with a 25% graduation rate. This is on the 6-year overall, and that also breaks down for 24% for underrepresented groups and 21% for low income. The target for 2 years from now is 30%, which is still too low, but that is the target. The great news is that these graduation rates are hard fought and worked for, because these come after 3 purges in 2014 and 2015, and what I call the Great Purge of 2015, where the campus released 1/3 of its enrolled students. Now, certainly, there were 20 reasons why they were released, the greatest of which was non-payment, but that still was a significant loss. Once those students have been tagged in the clearinghouse as first-year full-time freshmen, once they leave, they can never appear in that graduation rate. I mean, they're just gone, so they won't be there. Why we remain excited about the 30% for 2021 is that we are doing strong tracking of our cohorts. And so for this year, which would be May 2020, we have already graduated 20% of that class on the 4-year. This year, this May, we will have graduated 35% of that class. And then by the time we get to the proper tracking, if the formula holds, and that includes attrition, we'll be at 39.7%. So you'll see that line continuing to go up, but this 25% is for the 6-year. But by the time we get to 2020, we'll be at 32%, and by 2021, we should be at 39%. And that includes for our attrition model. So we plan to reach that target. The degrees awarded are the hardest number for both me and my alumni, because you cannot graduate students who are not there. And so even as we front load now in terms of freshman enrollment and retention, we won't see those students coming out of the model until the future. So even taking my first year, which was 2017, those freshmen that we enrolled in 2017 would not be counted until the 4-year 2021 and the 6-year 2023. So what we're really doing is working to save and complete students who were admitted prior to the current administration, but still our responsibility. But when you took, let's take one of the purges, 600 students off the top at one fell swoop, that's 600 students you just won't ever be able to graduate. And so we did a study with Hanover. Our graduation performance is above prediction given the amount of students we purged, but that was done at great cost, some of which, and I'll show you the blip in a minute, the institution did, which was not fiscally sound or sustainable. And so the institution was basically buying at one point the retention rate to keep students there. The next graph is the undergraduate enrollment. The undergraduate enrollment, if you see my first year, which I think was good and bad, the enrollment went up to, on the undergraduate level, 1,700, up from its low of 1,400. This year, we're over 2,000 at the undergraduate level. That masks our graduate number, but there's still a lot of work we need to do on the graduate level. There's great cry, particularly in the state capital, for us to improve our service with the Masters of Public Administration, which used to be a strong program in the 80s, somehow in the 90s and 2000 it died off. And so there's a push for us to ramp that up, and certainly from Senator McConnell and others for us to expand our graduate service in the ag area, agriculture, particularly in aquaculture and aquatic sciences. So that went up. If you notice, if you recall from last year, I talked about the decline where we went down to 1,600 in headcount, and that was a part of our pruning. When I arrived, I wrongfully assumed that all the admissions processes were strong, and so I began a tracking of admissions. And so admissions would have to report on a daily basis what were the applications, what were the admissions, what were the enrolled. And so we drove to the target. But what I did not know is we had a strong conditional admit system. And so many of the students who were admitted in that class, to say it that way, did not present a profile that would suggest they would persist. And so there's evidence that in that class, there were students with as low an ACT as 15, which our campus is not currently set up to service those students. So we did an intentional pruning through what's called SAP appeal. So if a student did not make successful academic progress, they were not granted a waiver for probation, or active probation. So when you go to the next chart, which we talked about last year, you see the impact of us purging those students out. You see the dip in the first to second year retention rate. Some of those students, and those case reason I know, because I got the call from the parent. She was trying to get the young man re-enrolled on SAP appeal. This is the one we found out had the 15 ACT, but he had earned like a 1.4 GPA his freshman year. If you've got a 1.4 your freshman year, the likelihood of completion is extremely low, particularly at our campus. But now that those students have been pruned from the tree, you'll see that the first to second year retention is increasing. There's one piece of good news masked in this, which shows that we're going to hit the target, but then there's one piece of bad news that we're still trying to work through. So as we begin to cycle through unit by unit data, where we are providing our most intensive services, students are being successful. So we received a grant, for example, to work in student support services with our most vulnerable student population. We have in that group, we're servicing in that group 145 students, not a lot, but, I'm sorry, we were funded for 145 students, but we're servicing 132. These students, and I had to even check the data because I didn't even know what one of them were. These students are either first generation, low income, and or physically or mentally disabled, classified in that category. And then there are some students who are a combination of one or more. At present, this year we will graduate 20 of this group. They have a 96% fall to spring retention rate and an average GPA of 2.6. But that's a very intensive engagement. So if you wrap the services, you can get them. We have started exit interviews though on this attrition, particularly for transfers. So what we've found is that while some are not retaining, they are transferring. 38% of those who we surveyed did transfer to another institution, according to Student Clearinghouse, were in another institution. And the cited reason for not returning were, quote, state of the campus facilities, so the physical infrastructure. And the second highest was out of class program. So there's some work for the institution to do yet in terms of capturing some of these students who are transferring. Certainly the CPE requests on asset preservation will help. The next chart is our average credit hours to graduation. As CPE knows, I've been fighting Aaron on this number because I think it's a false goal. He says that all schools have this 120 credit hour expectation. It's not mathematically possible to hit that number because 120 is the minimum number to earn a degree in our science, in our sciences, in nursing, and the STEM education major. Those are 126 and 128 credit hours to earn the degree. So you're never going to get to 120. The great news though is that we continue to drop the time to degree from 142. Now we're down to 137, which is about where most of the state is. I think we can get down to 130 in about 2 to 3 years, but 120, our campus will never hit that goal. That's just a reality. The success of underprepared students is a good and bad number. One, again, you see the impact of the pruning of those students who should not have been there in the first place. They weren't able to complete. But even with that, we still have the third highest performance in English and the highest performance in math in the Commonwealth. The last one relates to our net price and cost of attendance, which you just had a great conversation on. We do use the Thoroughbred Promise, which is a 4-year fixed price guarantee. So students who arrive in the fall have that cost for 4 years. That's also helped with our timely completion. The challenge that we are facing is that even while we hold the cost constant for families, the cost to operate the institution does continue to increase. So we're reaching a point where even our best fiscal strategies to save and control are running against the need to increase revenue. What's not here is that the good news, this is our challenge, and we are debating it because we're going to have to submit our tuition and fees to CPE this spring, is that we are now collecting the tuition we charge. So what we charge, we bring in. So our bad debt and write-offs have gone away. So our fear is that if we increase the tuition too swiftly, that we may put the institution back in the cycle of using an accrual number for the revenue projection that we aren't able to bring in on the cash flow. And so we're balancing that out. But certainly we have the lowest tuition in the Commonwealth, but that will not be sustainable for the long term. And so that's the walkthrough of the placement, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Questions?
Yeah. So it seems strange to me when I look at the 6-year graduation rate for 2018-2019 and the degrees awarded. Shouldn't those two things be somewhat related? Because there's an increase, which is great, in your graduation rates, but there's a significant decline in the number of degrees you're awarding.
Ideally, yes, but in our case, no, because this is bad math, but this rate relates specifically to who was there at the time the cohort was calculated. So even if the number of degrees remains low, as long as those degrees are being earned by the students in this cohort, you can have a higher percentage rate while you even have a declining net. Let me do it this way. So you had 100 students. You had 1,000 students in. You had 100 students in 2010. Let's just use that. But you graduated 50 of them. You would have a 50% graduation rate. You only had 10 students in 2015, but you graduated 7 of them. You would have a 70% graduation rate.
So the 6-year graduation rate doesn't mean anything then, as a comparator?
Not as a comparative. You get comparing the two side by side.
It's a measure of efficiency. No, but I mean, you can't compare 16, 17, 17, 18, 18 to 19 unless you know the enrollment numbers.
Correct.
There's a lag there.
It would seem like there's a way that we should be able to see that would be more representative of what's really happening. Because I would look at it and say, if I looked at the 6-year graduation rate, it's like, yay, that's great. Well, if I only had 5 students, my percentage is higher. That's not necessarily a good thing.
That's true.
Well, it's measuring the efficiency of how well you get a certain cohort through versus a total nominal number of degrees. So it is a completely different number, but I totally see your point. I think to compare them is probably would not be the best way to look at the numbers.
Well, but I'm saying you shouldn't be comparing 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19 on a percentage basis. unless we know the number of students in the base number. There's no comparison.
Well, there is a comparison in the sense that the percentage of the cohort that you're dealing with. You know, how well did you do with that? But comparing it to actual numbers.
But we need the actual numbers, right? I mean, that's what we're
Well,
striving for.
And I think what Kim's I'm playing off of what you're saying. So if I look at like the 2018, 2019 six-year graduation rate of 25.6%, if I look down below that, the undergraduate enrollment, I don't have a representation of that enrollment because we don't go back far enough, right? So if I had the 2014 or 2013 enrollment, I could stretch it out and say, okay, if that was 1,500, then you'd say, okay, that's 25. But if we would go back a couple more years, then you could compare 2014 enrollment to 2018 graduation rate and draw some kind of, I guess you have to go back to 2012 if you go six years.
So you
2013.
are looking at very
2013,
different
so you could-
cohorts every year. And so you really, it's a measure of how well you're doing each year for that specific cohort in terms of getting into it.
Those graduation rates of all 13 cohorts.
Yeah, 13.
Reflecting that even when you have, I think already do, I don't know if it's 4 years, but
I think what's skewing some of the data is the purge that occurred.
Absolutely.
Well, it's not going to skew the data until 2022, right?
No, we're in the skewed data.
Not if it's the 6-year graduation rate.
Right. The great purge years were 14 and 15, but in that 14 and 15, you would have people who started in, you would have everyone who started from 2011, maybe even 2010 to 2015. And so you don't start getting, you don't have this sheet in mind, you don't start getting unskewed data until you get that's 2020, till you get to 2022.
Chrissy.
What do we know about the employability, I mean, timing wise, and then average comp for first job upon degree attainment?
That will be on your leave behind. This year, 78% did internships, co-ops, or clinical experiences. We are improving our tracking. If you recall, 2 years ago, there was bad tracking. But from K-Stats, which used to be K-SUS, 54% of the KSU degree holders are still employed in the Commonwealth after graduation. And then we had that impact or return on investment by major. The highest retention and performance was in healthcare and nursing, which were 77% of our graduates were still here.
I think, I mean, and granted, I know it is limited to Kentucky, but in this period, and this is going to continue of the workforce crisis and talent shortage, I think we'd be well served to be really looking at how quickly graduates from our institutions get a job and what the compensation rate is, because this return on investment argument is getting harder and harder to make for students. And when we look at some of those numbers, just on a year and a half to get a job, I just think we really need, it's a great promotional piece. Arizona State, and I know we had, Dr. Crow come in and speak, but they promote that within 90 days, there's a huge percentage of their population that are employed.
David, can we glean that kind of information?
so
Yes. So our ability to track the students is going to be greatly enhanced with KY Stats because they have successfully negotiated a deal with bordering states. And so we also have been part of those discussions. And so we'll be able to do a better job of not just looking at in-state placement rates, but also the surrounding states. So you're exactly right. That's going to be a critical measure.
And it'll be on the back page of my leave behind. Those.
You've done a good job on some of these top line numbers. Can you give us a preview of your fall 2020 enrollment? Kind of let us know. I'm sorry, I'm off a year on it.
2020, fall 2020.
I'm sorry. This is the most current information then.
Right.
Okay, thank you. My apologies.
Lori?
I'm curious, I appreciate you, number one, sharing some of the stats after you purged some things, because I was kind of curious if you were at that original baseline, where you would be, and you've made some progress. And if I look at the success of your underprepared students in those gateway courses, I'm curious what your thoughts are and what your strategies are of why your math score is leading within the state on the publics, and what you all have done to help correct some of that.
Yeah, and we're just slightly ahead of U of L this year. It's usually the other way around. Our math courses and English courses were co-designed with U of L, so we use the same curriculum. So we had the best thinking at the time from, I'm getting old, didn't expect that question. I think it's the Grawemeyer School. I'm waking up. Grawemeyer School of Education at U of L. And so they designed these courses. The second thing that's helping is the attention to, what was helping bring it back up is the attention to the quality of the student that's coming in. So this year, the average freshman ACT is a 20 and a 3.03 GPA, which is certainly our highest in modern times. So it's a better student and a really strong curriculum model that we got from U of L. So we can't really take all the credit for that.
One thing you can take credit for, though, is the quality of the teaching, which really greatly influences the success of the student.
Yes, sir. And we've reduced the number of adjunct and part-time faculty, particularly teaching introductory courses. And so all of our introductory courses are taught by full-time faculty.
Other questions? Yeah.
First off, Dr. Brown, thank you for all the work you've done. You've done a definitely fantastic job. It looks like there's a lot of potential at K-State. But one thing I noticed, since you started your tenure at K-State, adult undergraduate enrollment has went down. As you know, that's one of the goals we want to set forward with the council, that we can improve adult undergraduate enrollment and graduation. What are your goals to improve those numbers?
And I have to be honest and transparent. We will fail on that ambition for a while, because we have a business model that we've employed. What was occurring over time was K-State had greatly reduced its traditional undergraduate footprint and was doing a high part-time commuter operation. That means no students, quote unquote, on campus, which speaks to this out-of-class experience. No students living in the residence halls, which is your auxiliary revenue, and paying room and board. And so while we did well on the adult students who were coming in, getting their academic competency and leaving, we didn't have that. That should ideally sit on top of a strong undergraduate. So the number of adults and part-time commuters has not changed, but it's a lower percentage because the number of traditional undergraduate students has increased. So when I arrived, the average age of a KSU student, that's all inclusive, was 29. Now the average age is 24, which is still, so we're trying to push back to a traditional college undergraduate model with all of those other services sitting on top. So while we were doing a great job with servicing people who were coming in and out, we weren't making any money. So even in terms of food service sales, they hated me for a year, maybe a year and a half. There used to be a commuter lounge that had microwaves and all this. And so students were able to come in between classes, lounge, bring their own food from home, heat it up. Yeah, well, that's a really nice service, but I don't make any money off them bringing food from home. So we opened a new food court, but there are no microwaves. There's no commuter lounge. So if you want to eat, you got to pay. You got to pay to eat. So you're right on that. We are failing on that, and we probably will for at least 5 to 7 years until we build the strong undergraduate program back.
I'm curious, and this isn't necessarily to you, but it talks to your all's development of reaching out to the surrounding states for students getting jobs out of the state, so we can help track them better, because we lose a lot of students to out of state. And so are all the universities doing that or just K-State? I'm curious.
It's a state level contract.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the various states. So we'll be able to track every student
Okay.
who goes out.
Dr. Brown, thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. And we'll leave the leave behinds on the
The
table.
leave behind,
Thank you.
if you'll pass them out right now.
Okay, let's give those to them. Give them both time.